I was standing in my brother's kitchen, holding a glass of wine and watching Jennifer Chen laugh with the other guests at Michael's birthday party when she turned to me with that smile. You know the one, sweet on the surface, poison underneath. She'd been making little comments all evening about my outfit, my job, the fact that David couldn't make it to the party because of a work emergency, but this time she went too far. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You know, Rachel, she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, it's funny how history repeats itself. Your father abandoned you and Michael when you were kids, right? I hate to say it, but your husband will leave you too. Some women just have that pattern. The room went silent, my wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. I felt every eye on me, felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Michael started to say something, but Jennifer continued, her voice dripping with fake concern. I mean, look at the signs. David's working late constantly, you're struggling financially, you seem so stressed all the time. Men don't stick around for that kind of drama. Trust me, I've seen it before. What Jennifer didn't know was that just 6 hours earlier, I had discovered something that would destroy her perfect little world. Hidden in a stack of restaurant invoices I was reviewing for our quarterly meeting, I'd found receipts that didn't add up. Payments to vendors I'd never heard of. Signatures that looked suspiciously like mine but weren't. And a bank statement showing transfers from our family restaurant's account to something called JC Enterprises. Jennifer had no idea that while she was standing there smugly predicting my marriage's demise, I had evidence sitting in my car that proved she'd been stealing from our family business for months. She thought she was so clever, so untouchable. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. My name is Rachel Thompson. I'm 35 years old, and this is the story of how my sister-in-law tried to destroy my family's legacy while insulting my marriage, never knowing that I'd already uncovered her web of lies. This is the story of how a woman who thought she was smarter than everyone else made the fatal mistake of underestimating the quiet sister-in-law she'd been systematically robbing. That morning had started like any other Tuesday in Oakwood Heights. I dropped Sophie off at school, drove to my job at Sterling Marketing Group, and tried to focus on campaign proposals while my mind kept drifting to the restaurant books I needed to review. The Corner Bistro had been our father's dream, a cozy family restaurant that Michael and I inherited when he passed 3 years ago. Michael handled the day-to-day operations while I managed the financial side, a partnership that had worked smoothly until Jennifer entered the picture. I'd always been good with numbers, detail-oriented in a way that served me well in marketing, and made me the natural choice to handle the restaurant's finances. Every month, I'd review the books, check the accounts, make sure everything balanced. It was routine work, almost meditative, and it kept me connected to Dad's memory in a way that felt meaningful. But lately, something had been bothering me. The restaurant's profits were declining despite Michael's reports of steady business. When I asked him about it, he'd shrug and mention rising costs, supply chain issues, the usual challenges small businesses face. Jennifer, ever helpful, had volunteered to take over more of the paperwork to lighten my load, as she put it. She'd been handling vendor relationships, processing invoices, even dealing with some of the banking. I should have seen the red flags then. But Jennifer had a way of making herself indispensable, of presenting solutions before problems became obvious. She was efficient, organized, and spoke the language of business with confidence. Michael was clearly grateful for her help, and I didn't want to seem territorial or ungrateful. After all, she was family now. That Tuesday afternoon, I left work early to pick up the quarterly reports before the party. Michael had texted me that he'd left everything in the office at the back of the restaurant, organized and ready for my review. The Corner Bistro was quiet in the mid-afternoon lull between lunch and dinner service, just a few lingering customers and the soft jazz music Dad had always loved playing in the background. I settled into the small office with a cup of coffee and spread the documents across the desk. At first glance, everything looked normal. Revenue reports, expense summaries, bank statements neatly organized in Jennifer's careful handwriting. But as I started going through the invoices, something caught my attention. A payment to Mountain Peak Catering Supplies for $800. I'd never heard of that vendor, and $800 seemed steep for catering supplies we didn't typically need. I dug deeper, another invoice for Alpine Food Services for $1,200. Then Rocky's Restaurant Equipment for $1,500. All companies I didn't recognize, all with payments authorized and processed. All with signatures that looked like mine but felt wrong somehow. The handwriting was close, but the pressure was different, the flow slightly off. My heart started beating faster. I pulled out my phone and started searching for these companies online. Mountain Peak Catering Supplies returned no results. Alpine Food Services led to a website that looked hastily constructed, with stock photos and generic contact information. Rocky's Restaurant Equipment didn't exist at all. I grabbed the bank statements and started cross-referencing the payments. Over the past 4 months, nearly $18,000 had been paid to vendors that either didn't exist or seemed highly suspicious. $18,000 that should have been profit, that should have been keeping our family business healthy and growing. But what made my blood run cold was the account number listed for one of the electronic transfers. I recognized it from a conversation David and I had about refinancing our mortgage. It was Jennifer's personal banking information, numbers I'd seen on documents she'd left on Michael's kitchen counter during a family barbecue. I sat back in the office chair, staring at the papers spread before me. Jennifer hadn't just been helping with the paperwork, she'd been systematically stealing from us, creating fake vendors and funneling money into her own accounts. The declining profits, the financial stress I'd been feeling, the way she'd been so eager to help with the business administration, it all made terrible sense now. My hands were shaking as I took photos of every suspicious document with my phone. I organized the papers back exactly as I'd found them, making sure nothing looked disturbed. I needed time to think, to figure out.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
How to handle this without destroying my relationship with Michael. But I also needed more evidence, more proof of what Jennifer had been doing. As I drove home, my mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How much money had she actually stolen? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? The birthday party was just a few hours away, and I'd have to face her, smile and make small talk, all while knowing she was a thief who'd been bleeding our family dry. I thought about calling David, but he was deep into a project deadline and I didn't want to burden him with this until I had a clearer picture. I thought about confronting Jennifer directly, but that would put Michael in an impossible position. I thought about going to the police, but I needed more evidence, more documentation of the pattern. When I got home, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, just staring at my house and trying to process what I'd discovered. Sophie was at her friend Emma's house for a sleepover, which meant I had the evening to think without having to pretend everything was normal for her sake. David had texted that he'd be working late again, trying to fix a critical system error that had emerged that afternoon. I went inside and spread the photos across my kitchen table, studying them like puzzle pieces. The fake invoices were sophisticated, professional-looking documents that would pass casual inspection. But under scrutiny, the patterns emerged. Similar fonts, identical formatting, even some of the same stock phrases used in the descriptions. Jennifer had created a whole network of fictional companies, complete with fake invoices and fraudulent billing cycles. As I studied the documents, I started seeing other irregularities I'd missed during my initial review. Legitimate vendor payments that seemed inflated. Supply orders that were larger than what the restaurant actually needed. Even some employee timesheets that showed hours for part-time workers I'd never met. Jennifer hadn't just created fake vendors. She'd been padding real expenses and possibly even inventing employees. The scope of the theft was staggering. I estimated that over the past 6 months, she'd stolen at least $30,000, maybe more. No wonder the restaurant was struggling. No wonder Michael seemed stressed about finances. No wonder Jennifer had been able to afford that new BMW and the expensive vacation she and Michael had taken to California last month. I realized I needed help, someone who could advise me on how to handle this legally and protect both the business and my relationship with Michael. I called my friend Sarah, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. Without going into specifics, I asked her about financial fraud cases and what kind of evidence would be needed to pursue criminal charges. Documentation is everything, she told me. Bank records, forged documents, any communication that shows intent to defraud. The more paper trail you have, the stronger the case. But Rachel, if this is about someone close to you, you need to be really careful about how you handle it. These kinds of discoveries can destroy families. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in my quiet kitchen and tried to imagine how to move forward. The birthday party was starting in 2 hours. I'd have to face Jennifer, smile and laugh, and pretend I didn't know she was a criminal. I'd have to watch her interact with Michael, knowing she was betraying him in the worst possible way. I'd have to listen to her make conversation about the restaurant, about family, about trust and loyalty, all while knowing she'd been stealing from us for months. Part of me wanted to cancel, to claim I was sick, and avoid the whole situation until I could figure out what to do. But another part of me was curious. I wanted to see how Jennifer would behave, whether there were signs I'd missed, clues about true nature that I could use to build my case. I wanted to observe her in action, now that I knew what to look for. I chose my outfit carefully, something that made me feel confident and strong. I practiced my smile in the mirror, rehearsed casual conversation topics that would steer clear of business or finances. I reminded myself that knowledge was power, and for the first time in months, I had information that Jennifer didn't know I possessed. The drive to Michael's house felt surreal. I was heading to a family celebration, while carrying evidence that one of the family members was a thief. I was about to spend the evening with someone who'd been systematically robbing us, someone who thought she was so much smarter than the rest of us that she could get away with it indefinitely. As I pulled into their driveway, I saw Jennifer's BMW parked in its usual spot, pristine and expensive. I wondered how much of that car had been paid for with money stolen from our family's restaurant. I wondered what other purchases, what other luxuries had been funded by her fraud. The thought made me sick, but it also made me angry. And anger, I was beginning to realize, was exactly what I needed to see this through. I walked up to the front door, rang the bell, and prepared to spend the evening with a woman who had no idea her world was about to come crashing down. Jennifer opened the door with her trademark smile, the same one she'd wear later when she told me my husband would leave me too. If only she knew that while she was busy predicting my failure, I was already planning her downfall. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Michael's friends from the restaurant, some of Jennifer's real estate colleagues, neighbors from their upscale Pine Ridge Drive neighborhood. Everyone was laughing, drinking wine, enjoying the warm Colorado evening on their beautifully landscaped patio. Jennifer moved through the crowd like the perfect hostess, charming and attentive, making sure everyone felt welcome and included. Watching her work the room, I found myself studying her with new eyes. She was good at this, at projecting an image of success and sophistication. Her dress was designer, her jewelry expensive, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who belonged in this upscale neighborhood, someone who'd earned her place through hard work and talent. The reality was that she'd stolen her way here, funding her lifestyle with money taken from a family business, built by a man who'd worked 16-hour days to provide for his children. Michael looked happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. He was proud of Jennifer, proud of their beautiful home and successful life together. He had no idea that the woman he loved was systematically destroying the legacy our father had worked so hard to build. He had no idea that every expensive dinner, every weekend getaway, every luxury purchase was being paid for with money stolen from our family. I managed small talk with the other guests, accepting compliments on my dress and politely explaining David's absence. Jennifer's real estate friends were particularly interested in our family restaurant, asking questions about the business and complimenting Michael on his success. I watched Jennifer field these questions smoothly, talking about our restaurant and our plans for expansion, as if she were a legitimate partner rather than a parasite bleeding the business dry. As the evening progressed, I noticed things I'd overlooked before. The way Jennifer subtly steered conversations away from specific financial details about the restaurant. The way she changed the subject when someone asked about profit margins or expansion costs. The way she positioned herself as the business-savvy partner who handled the boring paperwork while Michael focused on the creative side of cooking and customer service. It was a masterful performance, and I realized she'd been giving variations of it for months. She'd convinced Michael that she was helping, that her involvement was making the business more professional and efficient. She'd convinced me that she was competent and trustworthy, someone who could handle administrative tasks I didn't have time for. She'd convinced everyone that she was an asset to our family and our business. The truth was that she was a cancer, quietly spreading through our finances and relationships, weakening everything she touched while maintaining a facade of helpfulness and support. And tonight, for reasons I still didn't fully understand, she'd decided to attack me personally, to move beyond financial theft into emotional cruelty. When she made her comment about David leaving me, about my supposed pattern of abandonment, I realized this had never been just about money for Jennifer. This was about power, about proving her superiority, about establishing herself as the successful, stable sister-in-law while positioning me as the weak, unstable one destined for failure. She had no idea that her moment of cruel triumph would be the beginning of her downfall. She had no idea that the quiet, financially struggling sister-in-law she was insulting had already uncovered her crimes and was planning her response. She thought she held all the cards, but she'd just made the fatal mistake of revealing her true nature at the exact moment I had the evidence to destroy her. As I stood there in that kitchen, wine glass trembling in my hand, listening to the silence that followed her vicious prediction about my marriage, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the victim of Jennifer's ambition anymore. I wasn't going to let her steal from my family while insulting my character. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine while she systematically destroyed everything my father had built. Jennifer Chen had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate, and tomorrow she was going to learn exactly what that mistake would cost her. The days following Michael's birthday party felt like walking through a minefield. Every interaction with Jennifer became a performance, every family gathering a test of my acting abilities. I had to smile when she hugged me goodbye that night, had to thank her for the lovely party, had to pretend her words hadn't cut me to the bone. But behind my forced pleasantries, my mind was racing with plans. I couldn't sleep that first night. David came home exhausted from his work crisis, collapsing into bed without noticing my tension. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying Jennifer's words over and over. "Your husband will leave you too." The casual cruelty of it, the public humiliation, the way she'd smiled while delivering what she thought was a death blow to my confidence. What kind of person attacks someone's deepest insecurities at a family celebration? The kind of person who steals $30,000 from her husband's family business, apparently. By Thursday morning, I had made a decision. I needed more evidence before I could act, but I also needed to understand the full scope of what Jennifer had done. I called in sick to work and drove to the restaurant during the lunch rush, knowing Michael would be too busy in the kitchen to ask questions about my unexpected visit. I slipped into the back office and locked the door behind me. This time, I wasn't just looking at the monthly reports Jennifer had prepared. I was going to dig into everything, every bank statement, every vendor file, every piece of documentation I could find. If Jennifer had been stealing from us, there would be traces everywhere once I knew what to look for. The filing cabinet told a story that made my stomach turn. Jennifer had been incredibly thorough in her deception, creating elaborate fictional vendor relationships that spanned back almost 8 months. She'd established recurring payments to companies that existed only on paper, built false supply chains that justified regular transfers of money from our accounts to hers. The Mountain Peak Catering Supplies wasn't just a one-time theft. It was part of a sophisticated network of fake businesses that Jennifer had created to systematically drain our restaurant's profits. But it was the employee records that really shocked me. Jennifer had been submitting timesheets for part-time workers who didn't exist, creating ghost employees whose paychecks went directly into accounts she controlled. Maria Santos, supposedly a weekend prep cook who worked 15 hours a week. Tommy Williams, allegedly a dishwasher who covered the Sunday night shift. These people had never worked at the corner bistro, but they'd been receiving regular paychecks for months. I photographed everything, my hands shaking as I documented the scope of Jennifer's betrayal. This wasn't opportunistic theft or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated long-term plan to steal from our family while positioning herself as the helpful, organized sister-in-law who was making our business more efficient. As I worked through the files, I found myself wondering how long Jennifer had been planning this. Had she targeted Michael specifically because of the restaurant? Had she researched our family's financial situation before pursuing a relationship with my brother? The thought made me physically ill, but the evidence suggested a level of premeditation that went far beyond simple greed. The more I discovered, the angrier I became. Not just at the theft, though that was devastating enough, but at the calculated manipulation of my brother's trust and affection. Michael genuinely loved Jennifer. He'd been proud to introduce her to our family, excited about building a life with her. He'd trusted her with our father's legacy, believing she wanted to help preserve and grow what Dad had worked so hard to build. Instead, she'd been systematically destroying it while maintaining a facade of love and support. She'd attended family dinners where we discussed the restaurant's financial struggles, had comforted Michael when he worried about declining profits, had even suggested cost-cutting measures that would free up more money for her to steal. The level of deception was breathtaking in its cruelty. I finished my investigation and carefully returned everything to its original position. Jennifer's organizational skills had actually worked against her, making it easy for me to spot the anomalies once I knew they existed. But I also realized that Michael had probably never looked at these files in detail. He trusted Jennifer to handle the administrative side of the business, focusing his attention on the kitchen and customer service, where his skills and passion lay. That trust was about to be shattered, and I was going to be the one to do it. The thought made me heartsick, but I couldn't let Jennifer continue stealing from us indefinitely. Our family's restaurant was more than just a business to Michael and me. It was our father's memory, his dream realized, the legacy he'd wanted to leave his children. Jennifer was destroying that legacy one fake invoice at a time, and she had to be stopped. As I drove home from the restaurant, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I had evidence of extensive financial fraud, but using that evidence would destroy my brother's marriage and shatter his trust in the person he loved most. I could protect our family's business, but only by causing Michael tremendous personal pain. The logical part of me knew there was no choice. Jennifer had committed serious crimes, and continuing to protect her would only enable more theft and potentially greater legal consequences down the road. But the sister in me wanted to find some way to resolve this without destroying Michael's happiness. That evening, I sat David down and told him everything. I showed him the photographs, explained the fake vendor scheme, walked him through the evidence I'd compiled. He listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions but mostly just absorbing the magnitude of what Jennifer had done. "My God, Rachel," he said when I finished. "This is huge. We're talking about serious prison time if she's convicted. How could she think she'd get away with something this extensive?" "I think she believed I'd never look closely at the books," I said. "She positioned herself as the detail person, the one who handled all the boring paperwork. She probably figured I'd just review her summaries and trust that everything was legitimate." David nodded thoughtfully. "She almost pulled it off too. If you hadn't noticed those vendor names, if you hadn't dug deeper, she might have been able to continue this for years." The thought sent a chill through me. How much money would Jennifer have stolen if I hadn't caught her? How much damage would she have done to our father's restaurant, to our family's financial stability, to Michael's trust and happiness? "What are you going to do?" David asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I need more evidence, something that shows a clear pattern of fraud that can't be explained away as bookkeeping errors. And I need to figure out how to handle this without destroying my relationship with Michael." David took my hand. "You know you can't protect him from this, right? He's going to find out eventually, and the longer Jennifer continues stealing, the worse it's going to be for everyone involved." I knew he was right, but knowing and accepting are different things. Michael had suffered enough loss in his life. Our father's death had hit him particularly hard, and the restaurant had become his way of staying connected to Dad's memory. Discovering that his wife had been systematically stealing from that legacy would devastate him in ways I could barely imagine. Over the weekend, I found myself studying Jennifer with new intensity whenever we were together. Saturday morning, she and Michael came over for coffee and to help David with a landscaping project in our backyard. Jennifer was her usual charming self, complimenting my coffee, asking about Sophie's school activities, chatting about weekend plans. But now I noticed things I'd missed before. The way she deflected when Michael mentioned restaurant business. The way she changed the subject when he talked about financial concerns. The way she subtly discouraged him from getting too involved in the administrative side of the operation, praising his cooking skills while suggesting the paperwork was better left to people with business experience. She was manipulating him, I realized. Not just stealing from him, but actively working to keep him uninformed about the business's financial reality. She wanted him focused on the kitchen, while she controlled everything else, including the flow of money out of our accounts and into hers. "Michael seems stressed about the restaurant lately," I said casually while we were cleaning up after lunch. "Is everything okay with the business?" Jennifer's response was immediate and rehearsed. "Oh, you know how it is with small businesses. Rising costs, supply chain issues, all the usual challenges. But we're managing fine. Michael worries too much sometimes." She was lying to my face with practiced ease, dismissing legitimate financial concerns, while knowing she was the reason those concerns existed. The audacity was staggering. She was stealing from us, then comforting us about the financial stress her theft was causing. That afternoon, after they left, I called Sarah again. This time I told her the truth about what I'd discovered, asking for advice about how to proceed legally while protecting my family relationships. Rachel, this is way beyond family drama, she said. What you're describing is organized financial fraud on a significant scale. You need to talk to a lawyer who specializes in white-collar crime, and you need to do it soon. The longer this continues, the more money she steals and the more complicated the legal situation becomes. What about Michael? I asked. How do I tell my brother that his wife is a criminal without destroying him? Sarah was quiet for a moment. You can't control how he reacts to the truth, she said finally. But you can control whether you let this continue. And Rachel, if you don't stop her, you become complicit in the ongoing theft. At some point, your loyalty has to be to what's right, not what's comfortable. Her words hit harder than I'd expected. I'd been thinking about this as a family problem to be managed carefully, but Sarah was right. This was a crime in progress, and my knowledge of it came with responsibilities I couldn't ignore. Sunday evening, I made another decision. I was going to confront Jennifer directly, but not about the theft. I was going to see if I could get her to reveal more about her methods, maybe even get her to incriminate herself. It was risky, but I needed more evidence, and I needed to understand how deep this went. I texted her Monday morning, suggesting we meet for coffee to discuss restaurant business. She agreed immediately, probably seeing it as an opportunity to further solidify her control over our financial affairs. We arranged to meet Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where we could talk privately. As I prepared for that meeting, I felt like I was suiting up for battle. I'd hidden a small recording device in my purse, practiced casual conversation starters that might lead her to reveal details about her fraudulent schemes. I'd rehearsed my expressions, my body language, everything I could think of to seem like the trusting, slightly naive sister-in-law she thought I was. Jennifer had made a career out of underestimating me, treating me as the less successful, less sophisticated Chen sister-in-law. She'd probably seen my financial struggles as evidence of incompetence, my focus on family over career as a sign of
Weakness. She had no idea that those same qualities had made me observant, detail-oriented, and fiercely protective of the people and things I loved. Tomorrow, she was going to learn that her biggest mistake wasn't stealing from our family, it was insulting me while doing it. Part 3. The coffee shop was busy with the usual Tuesday afternoon crowd, professionals grabbing caffeine between meetings, students with laptops claiming corner tables. I arrived early, choosing a booth near the back where we could talk without being overheard. My heart was pounding as I tested the recording device hidden in my purse, making sure it would pick up our conversation clearly. Jennifer walked in exactly on time, looking polished and professional in her real estate blazer and perfectly styled hair. She scanned the room until she spotted me, then approached with that familiar smile that I now recognized as completely calculated. She slid into the booth across from me, ordering a complicated coffee drink that somehow perfectly matched her image of sophisticated efficiency. "Thanks for suggesting this, Rachel," she said, settling back in her seat. "I've been thinking we should probably touch base more regularly about restaurant business. Michael's so focused on the cooking side, sometimes the administrative details get overlooked." It was a perfect opening, and I forced myself to respond naturally. "I've been feeling the same way," I said. "I look at the monthly reports you prepare, but I sometimes feel like I'm missing the bigger picture. You've been handling so much of the day-to-day business management." Jennifer's expression brightened, clearly pleased by what she interpreted as acknowledgement of her importance. "It's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. Business administration has always been a strength of mine, and Michael appreciates having someone he can trust to handle the details." Trust. The word made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. "I've noticed some of the vendor relationships have changed recently. New suppliers, different service providers. Have you been working on optimizing our costs?" "Exactly," Jennifer said, leaning forward enthusiastically. "I've been researching better deals, finding suppliers who can give us the same quality for lower prices. Mountain Peak Catering Supplies, for example, has been fantastic. Much better rates than our previous vendors." She was lying so smoothly, so confidently, that I almost admired the performance. Mountain Peak Catering Supplies didn't exist, but Jennifer spoke about it as if she'd personally negotiated contracts with their sales team. The ease with which she constructed these false narratives was genuinely unsettling. "That's impressive," I said. "How did you find these new vendors?" "I know it can be challenging to vet suppliers properly." Jennifer waved dismissively. Networking mostly. Other restaurant owners, industry connections through my real estate work. You'd be surprised how many business relationships cross over between different industries. Another lie, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd told this story many times. I wondered if she'd practiced these explanations, rehearsing her responses to potential questions about her fraudulent vendor relationships. I'd love to learn more about your process, I said, pulling out my phone as if to take notes. Maybe you could walk me through how you evaluate new suppliers, what criteria you use to determine if they're legitimate and reliable. For just a moment, Jennifer's confidence flickered. Something in her expression shifted, a tiny hesitation that suggested she wasn't as prepared for detailed questions as she'd appeared. But she recovered quickly, launching into a generic description of business evaluation practices that could have come from any management textbook. As she talked, I found myself studying her more intently than I ever had before. She was beautiful in an unconventional way, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested significant investment in personal grooming. Her clothes were expensive, her jewelry subtle but clearly high quality. Everything about her presentation screamed success and sophistication. But there was something hollow underneath, a performance quality to her interactions that I was only now recognizing. She said all the right things, hit all the appropriate emotional notes, but it felt scripted somehow. Like she'd studied how successful people behaved, and was reproducing those behaviors without the underlying substance. You know, I said carefully, I've been wondering if we should consider bringing in an outside accountant to review our books. Just to make sure we're maximizing tax advantages and identifying any areas where we could improve efficiency. Jennifer's reaction was immediate and telling. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly, and she shook her head quickly. I don't think that's necessary, she said. Outside accountants are expensive, and honestly they often don't understand the nuances of restaurant business. I've been maintaining very detailed records, and everything is exactly where it should be. But wouldn't it be good to have a professional perspective? I pressed. Especially as the business grows and becomes more complex. Rachel, Jennifer said, her voice taking on a slightly condescending tone. I appreciate your concern, but I have extensive experience with business administration. Bringing in an outside accountant would just be throwing money away on services we don't need. Trust me, I've got everything under control. There it was again. Trust me. The phrase she used whenever she wanted to shut down questions or discourage closer examination of her work. I was beginning to understand that Jennifer's entire strategy relied on positioning herself as the competent authority figure while subtly undermining everyone else's confidence in their own judgment. I suppose you're right, I said, backing down in a way that I hoped would encourage her to become more open. I just sometimes feel like I'm not contributing enough to the business side of things. My background is marketing, not restaurant management. Jennifer's expression softened, clearly pleased by what she perceived as my acknowledgement of inadequacy. That's exactly why it's so important to have someone with real business experience handling these matters. You're great at your job, Rachel, but restaurant management requires specialized knowledge that takes years to develop. The patronizing tone was infuriating, but I forced myself to nod agreeably. You're probably right. I'm lucky Michael found someone with your skills and experience. We're both lucky, Jennifer said, but there was something cold in her eyes that contradicted her warm tone. Michael needs someone who can handle the business side while he focuses on what he does best. And you need someone who can take this burden off your shoulders so you can concentrate on your own career and family. Her words carried an underlying message that was becoming clearer with each conversation. Jennifer didn't just want to control the restaurant's finances. She wanted to eliminate my involvement entirely, to position herself as Michael's only trusted business partner while pushing me out of our family legacy. The thought made my anger flare, but I kept my expression neutral. Speaking of family, I said, I wanted to apologize for leaving the birthday party so abruptly the other night. I hope I didn't seem rude. Jennifer's smile became more genuine, clearly pleased by the opportunity to revisit her moment of triumph. Oh, don't worry about it at all. I understand these family gatherings can be stressful, especially when you're dealing with personal challenges. Personal challenges. Her euphemism for the marriage problems she'd so confidently predicted. I appreciate your understanding, I said. Sometimes I do get overwhelmed by everything on my plate. It's completely understandable, Jennifer continued, warming to her theme. Balancing work and family is difficult for everyone, but it's especially challenging when there are underlying relationship issues. I hope things work out for you and David, but if they don't, just remember that you'll be fine on your own. You're stronger than you think. The false sympathy was almost more insulting than her original cruel prediction. She was doubling down on her assessment of my marriage while positioning herself as the caring sister-in-law offering support. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cynicism. Thank you, I said. That means a lot coming from someone who has such a successful relationship with my brother. Jennifer beamed, clearly delighted by the compliment. Michael and I are very lucky to have found each other. We have the same values, the same goals for our future. Building something together, whether it's our marriage or the restaurant business, requires complete trust and mutual support. Complete trust. From a woman who was systematically stealing from the business she claimed to be building. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. That's beautiful, I managed. Michael is lucky to have found someone who shares his commitment to Dad's legacy. Your father built something wonderful, Jennifer said, and for a moment her expression seemed almost sincere. Michael talks about him all the time, about his work ethic and his vision for the restaurant. I feel honored to be part of continuing that legacy. The words should have been touching, but coming from someone who was actively destroying that legacy, they felt like a desecration. Jennifer was invoking my father's memory while stealing from his life's work, using our grief and sentiment as cover for her crimes. Our conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Jennifer sharing more details about her improvements to the restaurant's operations. Each explanation was a masterclass in confident deception, full of specific details about non-existent vendors and fictional business relationships. She spoke about these fabrications as if they were completely real, never hesitating or showing any sign that she was constructing an elaborate fantasy. As we prepared to leave, Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm really glad we did this, Rachel. I think it's important for us to stay connected, especially as the business continues to grow and evolve. Michael is so lucky to have a sister who cares as much as you do. The physical contact made my skin crawl, but I squeezed back and smiled. I feel the same way. Family is everything, isn't it? Absolutely, Jennifer said. Family loyalty is the most important thing in the world. I watched her walk to her BMW, probably purchased with money stolen from our family restaurant, and felt a cold fury settle in my chest. Jennifer Chen thought she was untouchable, thought she could steal from us while lecturing us about family loyalty. She thought she could predict my marriage's failure while destroying my brother's financial security. She was about to learn how catastrophically wrong she was about all of it. Part 4. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the recording device, my laptop, and a legal pad, transcribing every significant moment from my conversation with Jennifer. Her confident descriptions of fictional vendors, her dismissal of outside accounting oversight, her casual references to business relationships that existed only in her imagination. Each lie was another piece of evidence, another nail in the case I was building against her. But as I worked, I found myself thinking about Michael. My brother had no idea that his wife was a criminal, that their comfortable lifestyle was built on money stolen from our father's restaurant. He believed Jennifer was helping to grow the business, making it more professional and profitable. The discovery of her true nature was going to shatter him in ways I could barely imagine. David found me there at midnight, still transcribing and organizing evidence. He sat down across from me, studying the photographs and documents I'd spread across the table like puzzle pieces. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I keep thinking about what this is going to do to Michael," I said. "He loves her, David. He's planning a future with her. How do I tell him that everything he believes about his wife is a lie?" David was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table to take my hand. "You know what Jennifer said about our marriage the other night? About me leaving you?" I nodded, the memory still stinging. "She couldn't be more wrong," he continued. "We've had our struggles, every couple does, but we're solid, we're a team. And watching you handle this situation, seeing your strength and your integrity, just makes me love you more." His words brought tears to my eyes. The stress and anxiety of the past week had been taking a toll on both of us, but David was right. We were handling it together, supporting each other through a crisis that would have destroyed a weaker relationship. Jennifer sees what she wants to see, David continued. She saw a struggling family business and thought it would be easy to steal from. She saw you as someone she could manipulate and underestimate. She was wrong about all of it. Thursday morning, I called the lawyer Sarah had recommended, a woman named Patricia Williams who specialized in white-collar crime. I explained the situation and asked if she could meet with me to discuss my options. From what you're describing, Patricia said over the phone, this sounds like a substantial fraud case. But I need to see the evidence before I can advise you on how to proceed. Can you come in this afternoon? I took another sick day from work and drove to Patricia's office downtown. She was a serious woman in her 50s, with the kind of direct manner that inspired confidence. I spread my evidence across her conference table and walked her through everything I'd discovered. Patricia studied the documents with increasing intensity, occasionally asking questions or making notes. When I finished my presentation, she sat back and whistled softly. This is extensive, she said. Very sophisticated for a small-scale operation. Your sister-in-law didn't just decide to steal some money on impulse. She planned this carefully, created multiple fictional entities, established ongoing relationships with non-existent vendors. This is the work of someone with experience in financial fraud. Experience? I asked. You think she's done this before? I think you should find out, Patricia said. People don't usually start with schemes this complex. She's either had professional training in accounting fraud, or she's practiced on other victims. Have you considered researching her background, her previous relationships? The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on documenting Jennifer's current crimes that I hadn't considered the possibility she might have a history of similar behavior. What if Michael wasn't her first victim? What if she'd targeted our family specifically because she knew about the restaurant and saw an opportunity? How would I do that? I asked. Public records, social media, professional networks, Patricia explained. Marriage and divorce records, business filings, bankruptcy proceedings. If she's done this before, there will be traces. People who commit sophisticated financial fraud rarely limit themselves to a single victim. Patricia agreed to represent me if I decided to pursue criminal charges, but she also warned me about the potential consequences for my family relationships. Once you file a police report, this becomes a criminal matter, she said. You won't be able to control how the investigation proceeds or what charges are filed. Your brother will find out everything, and it will probably destroy his marriage. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Michael's happiness, about the life he'd built with Jennifer, about the pain this revelation would cause him. But I also thought about our father's memory, about the restaurant he'd worked so hard to build, about the $30,000 Jennifer had already stolen, and the damage she'd continue to cause if left unchecked. She has to be stopped, I said finally. Michael will be hurt either way, but at least this way he'll know the truth. That afternoon, I began researching Jennifer's background with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I started with social media, scrolling through years of posts and photos, looking for clues about her past relationships and employment history. Most of her online presence was carefully curated, full of professional achievements and romantic photos with Michael, but there were gaps that raised questions. Jennifer's LinkedIn profile showed a series of sales and administrative positions with different companies, but nothing that lasted more than 2 years. Her employment history before meeting Michael was sporadic, with unexplained gaps between jobs. For someone who presented herself as a successful businesswoman, her career trajectory seemed surprisingly unstable. I found references to a previous marriage, brief mentions in old social media posts that had been mostly deleted but were still accessible through cached searches. A man named Robert Chen, no relation to Michael despite the shared surname. Jennifer had been married to him for less than 3 years, and the marriage had ended in divorce about 6 months before she met my brother. Robert Chen proved surprisingly easy to find. He lived in Denver, worked as an insurance adjuster, and had what appeared to be a quiet, stable life. I debated whether to contact him, unsure about the ethics of reaching out to my sister-in-law's ex-husband. But if Jennifer had a pattern of financial fraud, Robert might be able to provide crucial information. Friday evening, I made the call. Robert's reaction to my introduction was immediate and telling. "You're married to Jennifer's new husband's sister," he said. "Oh my God, has she started stealing from your family yet?" The question hit me like a physical blow. She cleaned me out, Robert said bitterly. took everything I had, and disappeared. By the time I figured out what she'd done, she was gone and most of the money was unrecoverable. I tried to press charges, but she'd been clever about covering her tracks. Robert agreed to meet me the following day, and his story confirmed my worst fears about Jennifer's true nature. She'd pursued him aggressively, presenting herself as a successful real estate agent looking for a stable relationship with a good man. She'd moved in with him quickly, gaining access to his finances, and gradually taking control of their shared expenses. She was so organized, so efficient, Robert explained. I was grateful to have someone who could handle the bills and manage our accounts. I worked long hours, and she made everything seem so much easier. The parallels to her relationship with Michael were unmistakable. Jennifer had a template, a proven method for infiltrating families and gaining access to their financial resources. She'd studied what worked and refined her approach with each new victim. How much did she take? I asked. About $40,000, maybe more, Robert said. She'd been funneling money into accounts I didn't know about, using my credit to make purchases. She later returned for cash, creating fake expenses for things we never actually bought. By the time I realized what was happening, she was gone. Why didn't you pursue criminal charges? Robert's expression darkened. I tried, but she'd been careful about documentation, made sure everything looked consensual. She claimed the money was payment for household management services, said I'd agreed to compensate her for handling our finances. Without clear evidence of fraud, the police said it was a civil matter. What happened to her after she left? I hired a private investigator to track her down, Robert said. Found out she'd already moved on to someone else, a guy in Colorado Springs. Same pattern, same story. Sweet, helpful girlfriend, who gradually takes control of it. I tried to warn him, but he didn't believe me. Thought I was just a bitter ex-husband trying to cause trouble. My blood ran cold. What was his name? The man in Colorado Springs. Robert consulted his notes. Marcus Thompson. Owned a small construction company. Why, Thompson? The same last name as my maiden name. The same last name that would have appeared in any research Jennifer might have done about our family. She hadn't found Michael by chance, or fallen in love with him organically. She'd researched our family, identified us as potential targets, and then engineered a meeting, designed to put her in position to steal from us. Robert, I said carefully, I think Jennifer specifically targeted my family because of our restaurant business. I think she researched us and planned the whole relationship. Robert nodded grimly. That would fit her pattern. She doesn't just steal money. She studies her victims first, learns their vulnerabilities, their family dynamics, their financial situations. Then she creates a persona, designed to appeal to exactly what they're looking for. How long was she with Marcus? About 8 months. Same story as with me. Same story as what she's probably doing to your brother now. She gains their trust, takes control of their finances, then disappears when she's taken as much as she can safely steal. I felt sick thinking about how thoroughly Jennifer had manipulated all of us. Michael believed he'd found his soulmate, someone who shared his values, and wanted to build a future with him. Instead, he'd fallen victim to a predator, who'd targeted him specifically because of what she could steal. There's something else, Robert said. The private investigator found evidence that Jennifer isn't even her real name. Her actual name is Jessica Chen, and she's got a criminal record in California for check fraud and identity theft. She's been running this scam for years, probably decades. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The woman who'd insulted my marriage, who'd stolen from our family business, who'd manipulated my brother into believing she loved him, was a professional criminal with a long history of fraud. Everything about her identity was a lie, constructed specifically to appeal to whatever would make her victims trust her most. I have evidence of what she's been doing to our family, I said. Bank records, forged documents, recorded conversations. Would you be willing to testify about her history if we press charges? Absolutely, Robert said, without hesitation. I've been waiting years for someone to finally stop her. She's destroyed too many lives, stolen too much money. It's time for her to face consequences. Saturday night, I sat in my living room, with David and all the evidence I'd compiled. Jennifer's financial fraud against our restaurant, her recorded admissions of fictional vendor relationships, her history of similar crimes against previous victims, even her false identity. The case against her was overwhelming, but using it would destroy Michael's world. You have to tell him, David said gently. Michael deserves to know who he's really married to, even if the truth is devastating. I knew he was right, but the thought of causing my brother such pain was almost unbearable. Michael had been through so much loss already. Our father's death, the stress of running the restaurant, the financial pressures that Jennifer's theft had created. Learning that his wife was a criminal, who'd targeted him specifically for fraud, might break him entirely. But the alternative was worse, letting Jennifer continue her crimes, allowing her to steal more money, enabling her to eventually disappear, and leave Michael with nothing but debt and heartbreak. At least this way, he'd know the truth, and have a chance to protect himself. Sunday morning, I called Michael and asked if we could meet privately. He suggested lunch at a small cafe near the restaurant, somewhere we could talk without Jennifer or other family members around. As I drove to meet him, I rehearsed what I was going to say. How I was going to explain that his wife was a professional criminal who'd been systematically stealing from our family. There was no gentle way to deliver this kind of news. No way to soften the blow of learning that everything he believed about his marriage was built on lies and manipulation. All I could do was tell him the truth and hope that our relationship was strong enough to survive the devastation that was about to follow. Part 5. Michael was already seated at a corner table when I arrived at the cafe, looking relaxed and happy in a way that made what I was about to do even more difficult. He stood to hug me, commenting on how good it was to spend time together without the usual family chaos. He had no idea that in the next few minutes his entire world was going to collapse. "You sounded serious on the phone," he said, as we sat down. "Is everything okay with you and David? Jennifer mentioned you seemed stressed at the birthday party." The mention of Jennifer's name made my stomach clench. "Actually, Michael, that's part of what I need to talk to you about. But it's not about my marriage. It's about yours." Michael's expression shifted, concern replacing his earlier ease. "What do you mean? Is there something wrong with Jennifer?" I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, my hands trembling slightly as I placed it on the table between us. "Michael, I need you to look at some documents, and I need you to promise me you'll hear me out completely before you Rachel, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I opened the folder and spread out copies of the fraudulent invoices, the fake vendor payments, the bank statements showing transfers to Jennifer's accounts. These are financial records from the restaurant. Over the past 8 months, approximately $37,000 has been stolen from our business. Michael stared at the papers, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Stolen? What are you talking about? Who would steal from us?" "Jennifer," I said quietly. "These vendors don't exist, Michael. Mountain Peak Catering Supplies, Alpine Food Services, Rocky's Restaurant Equipment, all the others. She created fake companies and has been funneling money from the restaurant into her personal accounts." The color drained from Michael's face as he picked up the documents, studying them with increasing disbelief. "This can't be right," he said. "Jennifer handles the vendor relationships, but she wouldn't do something like this. There has to be an explanation." I reached across the table and gently took his hand. "Michael, I know this is hard to believe, but I've been investigating this for over a week. I have recordings of Jennifer describing these fictional vendors as if they're real. I have bank records showing the money going directly into accounts she controls." Michael's hands were shaking as he continued examining the documents. "But why would she do this? We're married. What's ours is ours. If she needed money for something, she could have just asked. Because this isn't about needing money for legitimate expenses," I said gently. "This is about theft. Professional systematic theft. Michael, there's more you need to know about Jennifer. Things about her past that she never told you." I pulled out the information Robert had provided about Jennifer's previous victims, the evidence of her false identity, her criminal record in California. Michael's face went through a series of changes as he processed each new revelation. Disbelief gave way to confusion to growing horror, and finally horror to a kind of numb shock that was painful to witness. "Jessica Chen," he said, finally reading from the criminal background report. "Her real name is Jessica Chen. She's been married for always, to men who owned businesses or had significant assets. She's a professional con artist." "I'm so sorry, Michael," I whispered. "I know how much you love her." Michael set the papers down and buried his face in his hand. For several minutes he didn't speak, just sat there processing the magnitude of what he'd learned. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red with unshed tears. "How long have you known?" he asked. I found the first evidence last Tuesday, the day of your birthday party. I've been investigating since then, trying to understand the full scope of what she's done. That's why you seemed strange that night, Michael said. You knew she was stealing from us when she made that comment about David leaving you. I nodded. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Standing there listening to her predict my marriage's fate, while knowing she was the one destroying our family. Michael's expression hardened. She said that to hurt you. She wanted to make you feel small and vulnerable, while she was robbing us blind. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who targets family. Michael, I talked to her ex-husband Robert, Jennifer or Jessica, whatever her real name is. She didn't meet you by chance. She researched our family, learned about the restaurant, and specifically targeted you because she saw an opportunity to steal.
Revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. You're saying she never loved me? That our entire relationship was just a setup for theft? I don't know what she felt or didn't feel, I said honestly. But I know that her primary motivation was access to our family's money. Everything else was secondary to that goal. Michael stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at the street. 3 years, he said bitterly. 3 years of my life with someone who was lying about everything. Her name, her past, her feelings, her intentions. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, I said firmly. You were trusting. You believed in love and partnership and building something together. Those are good qualities, Michael. She exploited them, but that doesn't make you weak or stupid. It makes me a fool, Michael said, his voice breaking. I trusted her with Dad's restaurant. I let her handle the finances, the vendor relationships, the business administration. I thought I was lucky to have found someone who wanted to help build our legacy. Instead, I handed our father's life work to a criminal. The pain in his voice was devastating. I went to him, putting my arms around him as he struggled with the grief and betrayal washing over him. We can fix this, I said. We can get the money back, protect the restaurant, make sure she faces consequences for what she's done. Can we? Michael asked. Or is it too late? How much damage has she done that we don't even know about yet? It was a fair question. If Jennifer had been this systematic about stealing from the restaurant, what else might she have done? Credit cards in Michael's name, loans using the restaurant as collateral, other financial entanglements that wouldn't become apparent until it was too late to address them. We need to do a complete financial audit, I said. Check every account, every line of credit, every business relationship she's had access to, and we need to confront her before she realizes we know what she's been doing. Michael turned from the window, his expression shifting from grief to something harder and more determined. How do we do this? How do we confront someone who's been lying about everything since the day we met? Carefully, I said, with evidence, with witnesses, and with a plan for what happens next. I've already spoken to a lawyer who specializes in white-collar crime. She's prepared to help us file charges and recover the stolen money. What about Jennifer? What happens to her? That depends on what she does when we confront her. If she cooperates, returns the money, and pleads guilty, she might avoid serious prison time. If she fights it, if she continues lying and trying to manipulate the situation, she could face significant criminal penalties. Michael nodded slowly. When do we do this? As soon as possible. The longer we wait, the more opportunity she has to steal additional money or cover her tracks. But we need to be smart about it. She's experienced at this, and she'll try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. We spent the next hour planning our approach. Michael would go home and act normally, giving no indication that he knew about Jennifer's crimes. I would continue gathering evidence and coordinating with the lawyer. Tomorrow evening, we would confront Jennifer together, presenting her with the evidence and demanding full disclosure about her theft. What if she denies everything? Michael asked. What if she claims the documents are fake or that there's some explanation we haven't considered? Then we show her the evidence from her previous victims, I said. We show her that we know about Jessica Chen, about her criminal record, about the pattern of fraud she's been committing for years. We make it clear that we know exactly who she is and what she's been doing. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Michael turned to me with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with deep sadness. Thank you, he said. I know this was hard for you, having to tell me all this. You could have just reported her to the police and let me find out when they arrested her. You're my brother, I said simply. I wasn't going to let you be blindsided by something like this. We're family and family protects each other, even when it means destroying someone's marriage and shattering their trust and love. Especially then, I said,
Because real love is based on truth, not lies and manipulation. What Jennifer gave you wasn't love, Michael. It was a performance designed to keep you compliant while she robbed you. That evening, I called Patricia Williams to update her on my conversation with Michael and our plan to confront Jennifer. She advised caution, warning that experienced con artists often became dangerous when cornered. She's invested 3 years in this relationship, Patricia said. That's longer than her usual pattern, which suggests either that your family's assets were particularly attractive, or that something went wrong with her exit strategy. Either way, she won't give up easily. What do you think she'll do when we confront her? She'll try to manipulate the situation, Patricia said. Deny everything, claim she's being framed, appeal to your brother's emotions. If that doesn't work, she might become aggressive, or even threatening. Make sure you're in a safe location with other people nearby. Patricia also suggested bringing recording equipment to the confrontation, to capture whatever Jennifer said in response to our accusations. If she admits to the theft, even partially, that recorded confession could be crucial evidence in a criminal trial. Monday passed in a blur of nervous energy and final preparations. I reviewed all the evidence one more time, organized it in a logical sequence that would be hard for Jennifer to dispute or deflect. I tested the recording equipment, planned the sequence of revelations, rehearsed my responses to likely denials and manipulations. Most importantly, I checked in with Michael throughout the day. He was struggling to maintain normalcy around Jennifer, to act like the loving husband she expected while knowing she was a criminal who'd been systematically betraying him. The strain was visible, and I worried that Jennifer might notice something was wrong. She asked me about dinner plans for tomorrow. Michael told me in a late afternoon phone call. I suggested we have a quiet evening at home, just the two of us. I thought that would be the best setting for the confrontation. Good thinking, I said. Private, familiar, no witnesses she might try to perform for. What time should I come over? 7 o'clock. I'll tell her you want to discuss some restaurant business. That should seem normal enough not to raise suspicions. Tuesday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth. One of those perfect Colorado evenings that made you grateful to live in such a beautiful place. As I drove to Michael's house, I tried to appreciate the setting sun and the mountain views, knowing that after tonight, my relationship with this place would forever be associated with confronting my brother's criminal wife. Jennifer's BMW was in the driveway, gleaming in the evening light. I wondered how much of that car had been paid for with money stolen from our family's restaurant. I wondered how many other purchases, how many luxuries, had been funded by her systematic theft from people who trusted her. Michael answered the door. Before I could ring the bell, his face pale but determined. She's in the living room, he said quietly. Are you ready for this? As ready as I can be, I said. Remember, let me present the evidence first. Don't react emotionally until we see how she responds. We need to stay calm and focused. Jennifer was sitting on the couch, looking perfectly composed in an expensive dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She smiled warmly as I entered. The same practiced expression I'd seen hundreds of times at family gatherings. Rachel, how nice to see you, she said, standing to give me a hug that felt like embracing a snake. Michael said you wanted to discuss some restaurant business. I hope everything's okay. Actually, Jennifer, there are some serious problems we need to address, I said, settling into the chair across from her. Problems with the restaurant's finances that require immediate attention. Jennifer's expression shifted slightly. A barely perceptible tightening around her eyes. What kind of problems? I review all the financial reports regularly, and everything seems to be in order. That's interesting, I said, pulling out my folder of evidence, because I've discovered some irregularities that suggest significant financial fraud has been taking place. I spread the fake invoices across the coffee table, watching Jennifer's face carefully as she examined them. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her hands tighten slightly in her lap. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, she said calmly. These are legitimate business expenses, payments to vendors we work with regularly. Mountain Peak Catering Supplies, I said, pointing to one of the invoices. Can you give me their contact information? I'd like to speak with them directly about our account. Jennifer's pause was almost imperceptible, but it was there. I'd have to look that up for you. I don't memorize vendor contact information. That's odd, I said, because when we had coffee last week you spoke about them as if you had an ongoing personal relationship with their sales team. You described them as fantastic, much better than our previous vendors. I may have overstated the personal nature of the relationship, Jennifer said, her voice remaining steady. But they are a legitimate vendor. I pulled out my phone and showed her the search results for Mountain Peak Catering Supplies. Except they don't exist. No business registration, no website, no physical address, just like Alpine Food Services and Rocky's Restaurant Equipment. They're all fictional companies, Jennifer. Companies you created to steal money from our family's restaurant. For the first time, Jennifer's composure cracked slightly. That's ridiculous, she said. But her voice had lost some of its confidence. I don't know what kind of research you think you've done, but you're obviously missing something. These are legitimate business relationships. Are they? I asked, pulling out the bank records. Because these transfers went directly to accounts in your name. JC Enterprises, which is registered to Jennifer Chen at your home address. You weren't paying vendors, Jennifer. You were paying yourself. Jennifer stood up abruptly, her mask of calm professionalism finally slipping. I don't have to listen to these accusations. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding or mistake. I've done nothing but help this family and this business. Sit down, Jennifer, Michael said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since I'd arrived, and his voice carried a cold authority I'd never heard before. We're not done talking. Jennifer looked at him, clearly recognizing that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Michael, surely you don't believe these ridiculous allegations. Rachel is obviously confused about something. I believe the evidence, Michael said. And there's more evidence, Jennifer. A lot more. I pulled out the information about her previous victims, her criminal record, her false identity. Your real name is Jessica Chen, I said. You've been married 4 times before, always to men who owned businesses or had significant assets. You have a criminal record in California for check fraud and identity theft. Jennifer's face went white, but she recovered quickly, switching to a different strategy. Even if some of that were true, she said, it doesn't prove I've done anything wrong here. People can change. They can leave their past behind and build new lives. People can change. I agreed. But professional con artists rarely do. I spoke with Robert Chen, your ex-husband. He told me about the $40,000 you stole from him using exactly the same methods you've been using on our family. Jennifer's composure finally shattered completely. You had no right to contact Robert, she said, her voice rising. No right to invade my privacy and dig into my personal history. We had every right to investigate someone who was stealing from our family, Michael said, standing up and moving closer to where Jennifer sat. Someone who was using our trust and love to systematically rob us. I never stole anything from you, Jennifer said, but the denial sounded desperate now, lacking her earlier confidence. Everything I did was to help the business, to make it more profitable and efficient. By creating fake vendors and funneling money into your personal accounts, I asked. By forging signatures and submitting fraudulent invoices. By stealing $37,000 over 8 months. I didn't steal anything, Jennifer repeated, but her voice was shaking now. The money I took was compensation for my work, for the hours I spent managing the business administration. Michael agreed to pay me for my services. I never agreed to pay you anything, Michael said coldly. And even if I had, it wouldn't justify creating fake companies and forging documents. It wouldn't justify lying about vendor relationships that don't exist. Jennifer looked back and forth between us, clearly realizing that her usual manipulation tactics weren't working. You don't understand, she said, switching to a pleading tone. I was trying to help. The restaurant was struggling, and I was finding ways to reduce costs and improve efficiency. By stealing from us, I asked. How exactly does theft improve our efficiency? It wasn't theft, Jennifer insisted. It was creative accounting, finding ways to optimize our tax situation and cash flow. I have an MBA. I understand business finance better than either of you. The lie was so blatant, so easily disproven, that I almost laughed. You don't have an MBA, Jennifer. In fact, according to the background check we ran, you never graduated from college at all. Another lie. Just like everything else about your identity. Jennifer's last defense crumbled, and suddenly she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Michael with desperate appeal. Please, baby, don't let her destroy us like this. She's jealous of what we have, jealous of our success and happiness. Can't you see what she's doing? Michael stared at her with an expression of profound sadness mixed with disgust. What I see is a woman who's been lying to me about everything since the day we met. What I see is someone who targeted my family specifically to steal from us. That's not true, Jennifer sobbed. I love you, Michael. I love our life together. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part didn't you mean to happen? I asked. Creating the fake companies, forging the signatures, stealing the money, or getting caught. Jennifer's response was to turn her full attention to Michael, grabbing his hands and looking into his eyes with desperate intensity. We can fix this, she said. I can return the money. We can restructure the business finances. We can make everything right. Please don't throw away 3 years of marriage over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Michael repeated incredulously. Jennifer, you've been systematically stealing from my family for almost a year. You've lied about your name, your education, your entire personal history. You've targeted us specifically because of our restaurant. How is any of that a misunderstanding? Jennifer released his hands and sat back, her tears stopping as suddenly as they'd started. Her expression shifted again, becoming cold and calculating in a way that was genuinely frightening. Fine, she said. You want to destroy our marriage over some accounting irregularities. Go ahead, but you'll never be able to prove intentional fraud. I'll claim everything was authorized by Michael, that I was acting as a paid consultant with full permission to manage business finances. However I saw fit. Even the fake vendors, I asked. Even the forged signatures, especially those, Jennifer said, with renewed confidence. How are you going to prove I created fake companies? How are you going to prove the signatures were forged without handwriting analysis that costs thousands of dollars? How are you going to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt? It was a chilling display of criminal expertise, watching her shift from tearful victim to calculating predator in a matter of seconds. This was the real Jennifer, or Jessica, or whatever her actual name was. This was the professional con artist who'd been manipulating my brother for 3. We don't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt, I said calmly. We just have to prove it's more likely than not that you committed fraud. And we have plenty of evidence for that standard. Jennifer's confidence faltered slightly. What do you want? She asked. We want our money back, Michael said. All of it. And we want you out of our lives permanently. And if I refuse, then we go to the police with everything we've gathered, I said. The fake invoices, the bank records, your criminal history, testimony from your previous victims. We let the criminal justice system decide what happens to you. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, clearly calculating her options. Finally, she looked at Michael with an expression that mixed hatred and desperate appeal. If I give you the money back, she said, will you keep this between us? No police. No criminal charges, just a quiet divorce, and everyone moves on. Michael looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to take the easy way out, to recover the stolen money, and avoid the public humiliation of admitting he'd been married to a criminal. But another part of him, the part that honored our father's memory and valued justice, knew that letting Jennifer escape consequences would only enable her to victimize other families. That's not enough, he said, finally. You've committed serious crimes, and you need to face serious consequences. Paying us back is just the beginning. Jennifer's expression hardened into something truly ugly. Then you're making a mistake, she said. Both of you, because this isn't over, and I'm not going down without a fight. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Jennifer's mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating predator underneath. She sat there on Michael's couch, in the home they'd shared for 2 years, looking at us with undisguised hatred and contempt. Gone was any pretense of love or remorse. This was a professional criminal, whose carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she was making it clear she intended to take us down with her. What exactly do you think you can do to us? I asked, keeping my voice steady, despite the chill running down my spine. You're the one who committed fraud. You're the one with a criminal record. You're the one who's been caught red-handed stealing from our family. Jennifer's smile was genuinely frightening. You have no idea what I'm capable of, she said. You think this is just about some restaurant money. You think you can destroy my life and walk away clean. I know things about both of you, secrets that would ruin your precious reputations if they came to light. Michael stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. What secret? What are you talking about? Your drinking problem, for starters, Jennifer said, her voice dripping with venom. All those nights you came home drunk from the restaurant. All those times you drove under the influence. I have photos, Michael. Video footage of you stumbling around, getting behind the wheel when you could barely stand up. The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow. It was true that he'd struggled with alcohol after our father's death, using drinking as a way to cope with grief and stress. But he'd gotten help, joined AA, been sober for over a year. Jennifer was weaponizing his lowest moments, his private struggles, as ammunition for her counterattack. That's in the past, Michael said, but his voice lacked confidence. I've been sober for over a year, Jennifer asked mockingly. Because I have security footage from last month showing you drinking at work. Multiple occasions where you were clearly intoxicated while handling food service. The health department would be very interested in that information. My heart sank as I recognized what Jennifer was doing. She'd been documenting potential leverage against Michael throughout their relationship, collecting evidence of his vulnerabilities that she could use if he ever turned against her. This wasn't just theft. It was comprehensive psychological warfare. And you, Rachel, Jennifer continued, turning her attention to me with predatory focus. Sweet innocent Rachel, who thinks she's so much better than everyone else. Should I tell Michael about your little affair with Tom Bradley from your marketing firm? All those late nights, working on campaigns that never seemed to produce any actual results. The accusation was completely false, but it was delivered with such confidence that for a moment I wondered if Michael might believe it. Tom Bradley was a colleague I'd worked with on several projects, nothing more. But Jennifer was skilled at mixing truth with lies, creating believable narratives that would be difficult to disprove. That's ridiculous, I said. I've never had an affair with anyone. Really? Jennifer pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a collection of photos. Because I have some very interesting pictures of you and Tom at that conference in Denver last year. Very cozy for just come. She showed us images that had clearly been taken with a telephoto lens from a distance. Tom and I talking at a conference reception, walking together to a print section, sitting at the same table during networking dinner. Innocent professional interactions that Jennifer had photographed, and was now attempting to frame as evidence of infidelity. Those photos prove nothing. David's voice came from the doorway. None of us had heard him arrive. There he was, looking calm and determined despite the chaos he'd walked into. And Jennifer threatening my wife is a very bad idea. Jennifer's confidence wavered slightly at David's unexpected appearance, but she recovered quickly. David, how nice of you to join us. I was just explaining to your wife and brother-in-law that they might want to reconsider their accusations against me. I heard, David said, moving to stand beside me. I also heard you confess to creating fake vendors and stealing money from the restaurant. That recording is going to be very useful in court. The color drained from Jennifer's face as she realized David had been listening to our entire conversation. She looked around the room frantically, as if searching for an escape route or another weapon to use against us. You recorded me without my consent, she said desperately. That's illegal. It can't be used as evidence. Actually, Colorado is a one-party consent state, I said. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's perfectly legal and admissible in court. Jennifer's last game that had failed, and she knew it. Her threats about Michael's drinking and my supposed affair suddenly seemed hollow and desperate compared to her recorded confession of financial fraud. She sat back on the couch, her expression cycling through rage, fear, and calculation as she tried to find some way out of the trap she'd walked in. You're all going to regret this, she said finally. I have friends, connections, people who owe me favors. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Michael said with quiet finality. Pack your things and get out of my house tonight, and if you ever contact any member of my family again, I'll make sure the police know exactly where to find you. Jennifer stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled, despite the fury radiating from her. You think you've won something here? She asked. You think destroying my life makes you better people? You're all pathetic, small-minded lunatics who can't handle someone who's smarter and more successful than you are. Successful? I asked incredulously. You're a thief and a con artist. Your entire life is built on lies and stolen money. What part of that do you consider successful? I've survived, Jennifer said coldly. I've taken care of myself in a world that doesn't give women any breaks. I've used my intelligence and my skills to create opportunities where none existed. That's more than any of you can say. The twisted logic was both fascinating and horrifying. Jennifer genuinely seemed to believe that her criminal behavior was justified, that stealing from families and destroying relationships was simply smart business. She constructed an entire worldview that portrayed her as the victim and her crimes as acts of empowerment. Get out, Michael repeated. Now, before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Jennifer gathered her purse and car keys, moving toward the door with exaggerated dignity. At the threshold, she turned back for one final parting shot. You know what the funny thing is, she said. I actually did love you, Michael. In my own way. You were different from the others, kinder, more genuine. I thought maybe I could make this one work for real. If you loved me, Michael said quietly, you wouldn't have stolen from my phone. You wouldn't have lied about everything from your name to your past. Love doesn't look like what you've done to us. Jennifer's expression softened for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something that might have been genuine regret. But it was gone quickly, replaced by the cold calculation that seemed to be her default setting. Goodbye, Michael, she said. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but don't expect to find it in your perfect little family bubble. The real world is harder than that. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and suddenly the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if a suffocating presence had been lifted. The three of us stood in the living room, surrounded by evidence of Jennifer's crimes, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Are you okay? David asked Michael, who was staring at the door as if he couldn't quite believe Jennifer was really gone. I don't know, Michael admitted. I feel like I've been living in some kind of elaborate lie for 3 years. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about our relationship, about our future together, it was all fiction. Not everything, I said gently. Your feelings were real. Your hope for building something together was real. The fact that she manipulated those feelings doesn't make them less valid or meaningful. Michael nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt and self-recrimination in his eyes. He was going to carry the emotional scars of this betrayal for a long time, questioning his judgment and his ability to trust again. What happens now? He asked. Now we go to the police, I said. We file a formal complaint, press criminal charges, and make sure Jennifer faces consequences for what she's done. We also work with the lawyer to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. And then we rebuild. David said. The restaurant, the family relationships, your ability to trust. It won't be easy, but you don't have to do it alone. The next morning, I called Patricia Williams to report that we had Jennifer's recorded confession, and were ready to move forward with criminal charges. She arranged for us to meet with detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit that afternoon. Detective Sarah Martinez was a serious woman in her 40s who specialized in white-collar crime cases. She listened to our evidence with growing interest, particularly when we played the recording of Jennifer's confession and threats. This is a strong case, she said, when we finished our presentation. The documentation is excellent, and the recorded confession eliminates most of her potential offenses. We'll need to verify some of the financial records and interview the previous victims, but I'm confident we can move forward with charges. What kind of charges? Michael asked. Grand theft, identity fraud, forgery, potentially racketeering. If we can establish a pattern of organized criminal activity across multiple victims, Detective Martinez explained. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted.
How long will the process take?
That depends on whether she pleads guilty or fights the charges. If she cooperates and accepts responsibility, we could have this resolved in a few months. If she contests everything, it could drag on for a year or more. The investigation moved quickly. Once it was officially underway, Detective Martinez and her team were able to trace the fake vendor payments, verify the forged signatures, and confirm Jennifer's pattern of fraud across multiple victims. They also discovered additional crimes we hadn't known about, including credit cards opened in Michael's name and unauthorized loans using the restaurant as collateral. Jennifer had been even busier than we'd realized, systematically destroying our family's financial stability while maintaining her facade.
Helpful efficiency. The total amount of theft and fraud approached $60,000, not including the damage to credit scores and business relationships. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Jennifer was arrested at her new apartment across town. The police found evidence that she'd already begun targeting another victim, a widowed restaurant owner in a neighboring county. Her predatory behavior was truly systematic, a calculated business model built on identifying vulnerable families and exploiting their trust. The arrest made local news, with several previous victims coming forward to share their stories. Robert Chen was interviewed on television, describing how Jennifer had destroyed his marriage and stolen his savings. Another man, the construction business owner from Colorado Springs, talked about the financial devastation she'd caused his company. Seeing those interviews was both validating and heartbreaking. We weren't Jennifer's first victims, and we wouldn't have been her last if we hadn't stopped her. The scope of her criminal career was staggering, with evidence of similar frauds dating back over a decade.
Michael struggled with the media attention, feeling embarrassed about being victimized so publicly. But I reminded him that speaking out was helping other potential victims recognize the warning signs and protect themselves from similar predators. "You're not the villain in this story," I told him during one of our many conversations about the case. "You're the person who trusted someone who seemed trustworthy. That's not a character flaw, it's evidence of your capacity for love and partnership." The criminal case proceeded smoothly, with Jennifer's defense attorney eventually advising her to accept a plea bargain rather than risk a trial. She pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, plus restitution for all verified victims. The civil recovery process was more complicated, as Jennifer had spent much of the stolen money on her lifestyle and had limited assets to liquidate. We recovered about 40% of what she'd taken from us, enough to stabilize the restaurant's finances, but not enough to undo all the damage. More importantly, we recovered our sense of security and family unity. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also demonstrated our ability to protect each other and stand up for what was right. Michael's trust in people was damaged, but his trust in family was stronger than ever. 6 months after Jennifer's arrest, Michael started dating again, cautiously building a relationship with a kindergarten teacher named Amy, who had no connection to the restaurant business and no interest in managing his finances. He was taking things slowly, but I could see his natural optimism and capacity for love gradually returning. The corner bistro recovered as well, with profits returning to normal levels once Jennifer's theft stopped draining our accounts. Michael hired a professional bookkeeper to handle the administrative tasks, maintaining careful oversight to prevent future fraud. The business thrived under legitimate management, honoring our father's legacy in the way it was meant to be honored. For me, the experience was transformational in unexpected ways. Discovering my own strength and investigative abilities led to a career change, leaving marketing to work as a fraud investigator for a firm that specialized in helping small businesses protect themselves from white-collar crime. I found deep satisfaction in using my skills to prevent other families from experiencing what we'd endured. David and I grew closer through the crisis, our marriage strengthening as we faced external threats together. Jennifer's prediction that he would leave me proved to be spectacularly wrong, just one more lie in her catalog of deceptions. If anything, watching me handle the investigation with determination and intelligence made him fall in love with me all over again. The legal proceedings concluded with Jennifer serving her full sentence, emerging from prison to face additional charges in other jurisdictions where her previous victims had finally found the courage to seek justice. Her criminal career was effectively over, her ability to manipulate and steal permanently curtailed by her conviction record. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't noticed those suspicious vendor names in the restaurant's financial records. How much more money would Jennifer have stolen? How many more families would she have victimized? How long would Michael have remained trapped in a marriage built on lies and exploitation? But mostly I focused on what we'd accomplished. We'd protected our family's legacy, sought justice for ourselves and other victims, and demonstrated that even professional criminals could be stopped by ordinary people who refused to be victimized. We'd turned Jennifer's greatest weapon, her underestimation of her targets, into her ultimate downfall. The woman who'd predicted my marriage would fail, who'd stolen from our father's restaurant while lecturing us about family loyalty, who'd built her entire life on manipulating people who trusted her, learned that some families fight back. She learned that intelligence and determination could triumph over deception and greed. Most importantly, she learned that telling someone their husband will leave them while sitting on evidence of your own crimes is a spectacularly bad idea. Jennifer Chen, or Jessica, or whatever her real name was, had finally met a family that was smarter, stronger, and more united than she'd calculated. And that miscalculation cost her everything. The Corner Bistro still operates today, a thriving family restaurant that serves as a testament to honest work and legitimate success. Michael runs the kitchen with passion and integrity, building the kind of legacy our father would be proud of. And every time someone compliments the business's success, I think about the woman who tried to steal it from us and failed. Justice isn't always swift, and recovery isn't always complete. But sometimes when good people stand together against those who would exploit their trust, the right side wins. Sometimes the quiet sister-in-law who seemed like an easy target turns out to be the person who brings down the predator. Jennifer had no idea what she'd discovered when she made her cruel prediction about my marriage. She'd discovered a family that wouldn't be broken, a woman who wouldn't be silenced, and a strength she'd never learned to recognize or respect. That discovery cost her 4 years of her freedom and the rest of her criminal career. And every day she spent in prison, she had time to think about the family she'd underestimated, and the woman who'd refused to let her get away with it. 3 weeks had passed since Jennifer's arrest, and I was still processing the surreal nature of everything that had happened. The woman who had sat in our family gatherings, who had shared holidays and birthdays with us, who had made that cruel prediction about my marriage failing, was now in county jail awaiting sentencing. The local newspaper had picked up the story, running a front-page article about the restaurant fraud ring that made our quiet family drama sound like something from a crime thriller. Michael was struggling more than he let on. He'd thrown himself into work at the corner bistro with an intensity that worried me, staying late every night to reorganize systems and implement new security measures. He'd hired Emma Rodriguez, a certified public accountant, to handle all financial oversight, but he insisted on reviewing every invoice personally, checking every vendor relationship, scrutinizing every expense report with the paranoia of someone who'd been burned badly. I should have seen it, he said for the 100th time, as we sat in the restaurant's office after closing on a Tuesday night. All those signs, all those little inconsistencies. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, I repeated, knowing the words felt hollow to him even as they remained true. You were trusting someone you loved. That's what people in healthy relationships do. Healthy relationships, Michael laughed bitterly. Right, I was in a relationship with a professional criminal who was systematically robbing our family. Real healthy. The guilt was eating at him. I could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, in the dark circles under his eyes, in the way he flinched every time someone mentioned Jennifer's name. He felt responsible not just for his own victimization, but for exposing our entire family to her predatory behavior. Detective Martinez had called that morning with an update on the investigation. Jennifer's apartment had yielded a treasure trove of evidence that painted a picture of criminal organization that was staggering in its scope and sophistication. She'd maintained detailed files on dozens of potential targets, complete with financial assessments, psychological profiles, and strategic approaches for gaining their trust. She had a whole operation, Detective Martinez had explained. Fake business cards, multiple identities, even a network of accomplices who helped her establish credible backstories. This wasn't some desperate woman making bad choices. This was organized crime. The files on our family were particularly chilling. Jennifer had researched us for months before ever meeting Michael, studying our financial situation, our family dynamics, our personal vulnerabilities. She'd identified Michael as the ideal target because of his grief over our father's death, his relative inexperience with relationships, and his trusting nature. She'd even noted that having a sister involved in the business could provide additional opportunities for financial manipulation. Reading those files felt like a violation beyond the financial theft. Jennifer hadn't just stolen our money, she'd studied us like laboratory specimens, cataloging our weaknesses, and planning our exploitation with clinical precision. The woman who'd shared intimate moments with my brother, who'd been welcomed into our family circle, had been analyzing us the entire time for maximum extractable value. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was evidence that Jennifer had been planning her exit strategy almost from the beginning of her relationship with Michael. She'd established offshore accounts, created false identities for potential relocation, and even researched countries with non-extradition treaties. This wasn't a crime of opportunity that had spiraled out of control. This was a carefully planned operation with predetermined endpoints. She never intended to stay. I told Michael as we reviewed the detective's findings. This was always going to end with her disappearing with whatever money she could steal. The only variable was timing. Michael stared at the documents spread across the desk, his face cycling through expressions of hurt, anger, and something approaching relief. So none of it was real, he said finally. Not the love, not the partnership, not the plans for our future. It was all just part of her strategy. I think that might actually make it easier to heal from, I said carefully. You weren't rejected by someone who genuinely loved you. You were manipulated by someone who was incapable of genuine love. The failure wasn't in your relationship, it was in her humanity. The criminal proceedings were moving forward with unusual speed, partly because of the overwhelming evidence, and partly because Jennifer's defense attorney was encouraging her to accept a plea deal rather than face trial. The prosecutor had offered a sentence of 4 to 8 years in exchange for full restitution and cooperation in prosecuting her accomplices. Patricia Williams, our lawyer, was optimistic about financial recovery despite Jennifer's limited assets. She was clever about hiding money, but not as clever as she thought. Patricia explained during our weekly update meeting. We've identified several accounts and investments that can be liquidated to provide restitution. You won't recover everything, but it should be enough to stabilize the restaurant's finances. The prospect of recovering even part of the stolen money was encouraging, but the real value was in preventing Jennifer from victimizing other families. Detective Martinez had connected with law enforcement agencies in 3 other states where Jennifer's previous crimes had been reported, building a comprehensive case that would keep her incarcerated for years. Cases like this usually involve multiple victims who never report the crimes. Detective Martinez had explained, people feel embarrassed about being conned, or they don't think they have enough evidence, or they just want to move on with their lives. Your decision to come forward is going to help a lot of families get justice. That aspect of our experience felt meaningful in a way that transcended our personal situation. We weren't just protecting ourselves, we were protecting future victims from Jennifer's predatory behavior. Every day she spent in prison was a day when some other trusting family remained safe from her manipulation. David had been my anchor throughout the entire ordeal, providing emotional support and practical assistance without ever making me feel like I was handling things wrong. The stress of the investigation and legal proceedings had actually brought us closer together, demonstrating the strength of our partnership in ways that normal daily life never revealed. You know what the ironic thing is? David said one evening as we sat on our back porch, watching Sophie play in the yard. Jennifer's prediction about our marriage was the exact opposite of what actually happened. Going through this crisis together made our relationship stronger, not weaker. He was right. The experience had shown us both that we could handle serious problems as a team, that our communication was solid, and that our commitment to each other was unshakable. If anything, Jennifer's cruel prediction had highlighted how wrong outsiders could be about the strength of a relationship they'd never bothered to understand. Sophie had handled the family drama with remarkable resilience, accepting our explanation that Uncle Michael's wife had made some bad choices and wouldn't be part of our family anymore. At 10 years old, she didn't need to understand the complexities of financial fraud, but she'd picked up on the emotional undercurrents and had started spending more time with Michael, seeming to sense that he needed extra family support. "Will Uncle Michael be okay?" she'd asked me one night as I tucked her into bed. "He's sad right now," I told her honestly. "But he has people who love him, and that's going to help him feel better eventually." "Good," Sophie had said with the confident certainty of childhood. Because Jennifer was mean anyway. I never liked how she talked to people. Out of the mouths of babes, Sophie had picked up on Jennifer's subtle cruelty and manipulative communication style in ways that we adults had rationalized or overlooked. Children often have better instincts about people than adults do, unencumbered by social expectations about giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. The restaurant industry community in Oakwood Heights had rallied around the corner bistro once news of Jennifer's crimes became public. Other business owners shared their own stories of near misses with financial fraud, offering advice about protective measures and expressing solidarity with our family's experience. The support was touching and practical, helping Michael understand that he wasn't alone in having been targeted by professional criminals. "It could happen to anyone," said Maria Santos, who owned a bakery 3 blocks away. "These people are experts at manipulation. They study psychology, they practice their techniques, they target people specifically because they're good, trusting individuals. Being victimized doesn't make you weak or stupid." That community support was crucial for Michael's healing process. He'd been carrying shame about the victimization, feeling like his failure to detect Jennifer's deception reflected poorly on his intelligence and judgment. Hearing from other business owners who'd faced similar threats helped him understand that professional criminals succeed by exploiting normal human emotions like love, trust, and hope. The financial audit of the restaurant revealed additional irregularities that we'd missed during our initial investigation. Jennifer had been systematically padding legitimate expenses, adding small surcharges to real vendor invoices, and pocketing the difference. She'd also been manipulating inventory records, ordering supplies that never arrived, and billing us for products that were never delivered. The scope of her deception was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Every aspect of the restaurant's financial operations had been compromised, every vendor relationship tainted by her fraudulent manipulation. It was going to take months to untangle all the false information and establish legitimate business practices. She was playing a long game. Emma Rodriguez, our new accountant, explained as she walked us through her findings. Small amounts from multiple sources, spread out over time to avoid detection. Very sophisticated for a restaurant fraud operation. Sophisticated and personal, Michael added. She knew exactly how much we could afford to lose without noticing, exactly how to explain discrepancies in ways that seemed reasonable. She used her intimate knowledge of our family dynamics to make her theft more effective. 6 weeks after Jennifer's arrest, we attended her sentencing hearing. She appeared in court wearing an orange jumpsuit, her previously perfect appearance disheveled, and her confident demeanor replaced by sullen defiance. The woman who'd once commanded rooms with her charm and sophistication looked small and bitter in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the courtroom. The prosecutor read a victim impact statement that I'd written on behalf of our family, describing not just the financial damage, but the emotional devastation of being betrayed by someone we'd trusted and loved. The defendant didn't just steal money. The statement read, "She stole our sense of security, our ability to trust, and our faith in human decency. She weaponized our love and generosity against us." Jennifer's defense attorney made a brief plea for leniency, citing her difficult childhood and claiming that her crimes were the result of desperation rather than greed. But the evidence of careful planning and multiple victims undermined any argument that her actions were impulsive or situational. Judge Patricia Lawson delivered the sentence with quiet authority. 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Full restitution to all verified victims. Ongoing cooperation with law enforcement regarding additional cases. This court finds that the defendant's crimes were sophisticated, premeditated, and caused substantial harm to multiple families. Jennifer showed no emotion as the sentence was read, staring straight ahead with the blank expression of someone who'd mentally disconnected from the proceedings. She was led away in handcuffs without looking at any of her victims, maintaining her emotional detachment to the very end. Walking out of that courtroom felt like closing a chapter that had consumed our lives for months. Justice had been served, consequences had been delivered, and we could finally begin the process of moving forward without the weight of ongoing legal proceedings. The recovery process was gradual but steady. The Corner Bistro's finances stabilized as we implemented new oversight procedures and rebuilt relationships with legitimate vendors. Michael slowly began to rediscover his passion for cooking and customer service, remembering why he'd fallen in love with the restaurant business in the first place. "You know what I realized?" Michael said one evening, as we closed the restaurant together. "Dad would have handled this exactly the way we did. He would have fought back, protected the family, made sure justice was served. Maybe that's the real legacy of this place, not just the food but the values." He was right. Our father had built the Corner Bistro on principles of honest work, fair dealing, and community service. Jennifer had tried to corrupt those values for her own profit, but ultimately she'd failed. The restaurant emerged from her attack stronger and more committed to its founding principles. 3 months after the sentencing, Michael started dating again. Amy Chen, a kindergarten teacher with no connection to the restaurant industry, had approached him at a community event with genuine interest and refreshing directness. She knew about his recent experience with fraud and wasn't deterred by the emotional baggage that came with it. "I figure anyone who's been through what you've been through and come out stronger is probably worth getting to know," Amy had told him. "Plus you're cute and you can cook. That's a pretty good combination." Their relationship developed slowly, with Michael being cautious about trust and Amy being patient with his healing process. She understood that rebuilding faith in romantic partnership would take time, and she was willing to earn his trust gradually, rather than rushing into emotional intimacy. Watching Michael rediscover happiness was one of the most rewarding aspects of our recovery. The trauma of Jennifer's betrayal had left him questioning his judgment and his ability to recognize genuine emotions in other people. Amy's consistency and transparency were helping him understand that not everyone was hiding ulterior motives behind their affection. My own career had taken an unexpected turn as a result of our experience with financial fraud. Several small business owners in the area had approached me for advice about protecting themselves from similar crimes, leading to consulting opportunities that gradually evolved into a new professional focus. "You have a talent for this," Patricia Williams had told me during one of our follow-up meetings. "You approached the investigation methodically, documented everything thoroughly, and built a case that was impossible to dispute. Have you ever considered fraud investigation as a career?" The suggestion had seemed ridiculous at first, but the more I thought about it, the more appealing it became. My marketing background had given me research skills and attention to detail that translated well to financial investigation. My experience as a victim gave me empathy for other families facing similar situations. 6 months after Jennifer's conviction, I left Sterling Marketing Group to join Williams & Associates as a fraud investigator specializing in small business cases. The work was challenging and meaningful, using my skills to protect other families from the kind of predatory behavior we'd experienced. It's perfect for you, David had said, when I told him about the career change. You get to be the person who helps families fight back against people like Jennifer. You get to turn your worst experience into something that protects other people. The transition wasn't without challenges. Fraud investigation required additional training and certification, long hours reviewing financial records, and frequent exposure to the worst aspects of human greed and manipulation. But it also provided deep satisfaction, knowing that my work was preventing other families from experiencing the devastation we'd endured. 1 year after Jennifer's arrest, Detective Martinez called with news that our case had led to the conviction of 3 additional accomplices who'd helped Jennifer establish false identities and launder stolen money. The criminal network she'd been part of was more extensive than anyone had initially realized. But our evidence had provided the breakthrough that allowed law enforcement to dismantle the entire operation. Your decision to come forward started a domino effect, Detective Martinez explained. We've now recovered money for over 20 families who were victimized by this network. Some of them had given up hope of ever seeing justice. That call felt like the true conclusion of our ordeal. We hadn't just sought justice for ourselves, we'd helped expose and destroy a criminal organization that had been victimizing families for years. Jennifer's attempt to steal from us had ultimately led to the downfall of her entire criminal enterprise. The Corner Bistro celebrated its 5th anniversary under Michael's management that fall, with a community celebration that drew hundreds of customers and friends. The restaurant was thriving financially and had become a beloved fixture in Oakwood Heights, known for excellent food and ethical business practices. During the anniversary celebration, Michael gave a brief speech, thanking the community for their support during our difficult year. This restaurant has always been about more than just food, he said. It's about family, community, and the values that make life worth living. We faced some challenges recently, but they only made us more committed to those values. He didn't mention Jennifer by name, but everyone in the room knew what he was referring to. The community had rallied around our family during the crisis, and their continued support was a testament to the relationships our father had built, and that Michael was continuing to nurture. As I looked around the crowded dining room that night, watching families enjoy meals together, and friends celebrating life's milestones, I felt profound gratitude for the way our story had ended. Jennifer had tried to destroy something precious, but instead she'd made it stronger. She'd attempted to isolate us and turn us against each other, but instead she'd brought us closer together. The woman who'd predicted my marriage would fail was serving a prison sentence, while David and I planned our 15th wedding anniversary celebration. The woman who'd stolen from our father's restaurant was watching from behind bars as the business thrived under honest management. The woman who'd thought she was smarter than everyone else had been outsmarted by the quiet family she'd underestimated. Justice isn't always swift. And recovery isn't always complete. But sometimes, when good people stand together against those who would exploit their trust, the right side wins. Sometimes the predator becomes the prey, and the victims become the victors. Jennifer Chen, or Jessica, or whatever her real name was, had finally met a family that was stronger than her lies, smarter than her schemes, and more united than her attempts to divide us. That discovery had cost her years of freedom, and the end of her criminal career. And every day she spent behind bars, she had time to think about the family she'd tried to destroy, and the woman who'd refused to let her get away with it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.